And here we go. We're live.
We are live. Oh, all right. Welcome to the agency hot seat with your hosts, Ryan Watson. Hello, Ryan Watson, partner here at Upsourced, and I am joined by Meredith Pickrell. Meredith, say hello.
Hello. Excited to be here.
Hooray. Yes, as always. So, for those of you that are new to the agency hot seat, it is very simple. You come, you join, you ask us questions, and we answer those questions with our fount of knowledge and expertise across hundreds of agencies just like yours. Okay, so Caroline, as the group, I know we're at the top of the hour, and so for those folks that are joining in, probably just getting settled, coming back from the bathroom, typing out their questions, we'll give them a second. But I know that you compiled, gosh, it looked like a half a dozen questions from our LinkedIn and other sources. So why don't you kick us off with one of those, and then feel free to mix in audience questions as we go.
Awesome. Sounds great. So to kick us off, we're going to start with how do I set a realistic growth goal for my agency?
How do you set a realistic growth goal for your agency? I mean, I can go unless you have something that you want to. What do you think, Meredith? Do you want to start? Or do you want me to start?
You can start.
Okay.
I have
Okay.
thoughts, but I'll let you kick off and I'll riff with you.
Well, so okay, so there's a couple of ways to do this. Again, I can tell you what it's not. I mean, I can tell you the most common method I see of like setting the annual plan is sort of like a top down. We did X in revenue, so we therefore think we can do Y. Sometimes that's just arbitrary. Like we did 3, so we're going to do 3.5 this year. Sometimes it's like we're going to grow by 10% as if we could sort of manifest that kind of result. Those two are not, I mean, people do them and you do whatever you want, but I don't think you're going to find that exercise very predictive. The best way to do this, in my opinion, and again, I'm speaking specifically about revenue here, like how do I forecast revenue, is first to divide your revenue into existing and new. In other words, and by the way, you may be the kind of agency where your existing bucket is 0, and that's fine. But for many agencies, particularly the most successful ones, there is an existing bucket and a new bucket. And what do I mean by existing? Existing is so let's just say I'm doing this exercise is January 1st of whatever year it is. Entering the year, I have some customers, right? I've been working with people. I got clients, they've got names. So my first exercise, those are my existing logos, my existing clients. So my first exercise is how much revenue do I expect to generate from that cohort of clients, right? That's my existing revenue forecast. And, some of them may be like recurring revenue retainer base. Of course, that's quite easy. You just kind of expect some amount of, continuation of that with an assumption for churn. More commonly in like the agency space, it's not quite so recurring, but it's still like I'd say, some of our agencies have existing revenue by way of like an annuity stream of projects. In other words, I did some projects with this customer and I think I'm going to be able to do more projects with that client. And so that's account planning. Like that's an account planning exercise. So you should go through the process of doing an account planning exercise across each of those logos, and that should generate a bottoms up expectation of revenue. That's existing revenue. Then you should create a completely separate exercise around new revenue. And the new revenue is going to be a little bit harder to predict, maybe just a bit more arbitrary, but that should be a function of, again, in a perfect case scenario, you've been doing this for a while. And so you have some idea of like, these are the resources and the activities I'm going to put towards generating new logos. This is what I've seen in the past. Am I putting the same amount of emphasis in? And do I expect to have roughly similar results in return for the same input? Yes or no? Keep in mind that like new revenue does not grow exponentially. So, throwing like a 10% on it without changing the inputs is probably silly. And so, anyway, like ask yourself, what are the inputs from a new revenue standpoint? What have I historically gotten from that? What do I think I'm going to get this year? And then you smash them together. And that's my total expectation. So, anyway, long-winded explanation, but that is the bottoms up way to come up with your revenue expectation. And like the last thing I'll say is, if you happen to be one of those agencies, you're a branding agency, your client is like a mid-market business, they're going to buy a logo project from you or a brand identity project from you like once a decade, then you just don't have existing revenue. It's all new. It's a tough business to sort of run and forecast for, but the same exercise, you just kind of skip over the existing part because you don't have that. So anyway, Meredith, I know I there was a lot of words as usual. Anything you disagree with? Anything you'd add to that?
You should probably start before January, but no.
Well, sure. I was saying it that way to sort of make the cutoff a little bit more, but yes,
No.
yes, I agree. This is
I agree with that.
early Q4 exercise.
Yeah, I mean, and as we're doing this in like real life with our clients, you also have to, as you're talking about top line revenue growth in service businesses, you need to think about your people, who's going to service that, and as that revenue grows, hiring needs alongside of that.
And let me also just say one other thing about this topic, which is this is kind of like a thread of a framework. We're big on frameworks here. So this is like a preview to a framework that it was forthcoming, but is not fully baked yet, which is the premise of the question is maybe even wrong from the start, which is not every agency is in a position to be able to forecast revenue and should try. Like if you are, so we have this whole concept of the life cycle of agencies, and in the build mode, we have the hierarchy of financial needs, and at the top of the pyramid is this idea of like predictable revenue growth. And if you have a revenue generation machinery that creates some degree of predictability, then you have a right and ability to forecast revenue. If you don't have that, I'm not sure what you're getting out of trying to do it. Like trying to forecast your business in, several cycles into the future, like a year or more. I'm not sure you're going to be able to do that. And I don't know what value other than just like, New Year's resolution kind of thing, like you're going to get out of it. You may be better off managing to a shorter cycle, which
I've actually seen some bad assumptions built around that, where it's like, okay, we're going to staff up to be this model. We're
exactly.
And then guess what? You can't sell that. And now we've got all of these people that we have to do something with.
And by the way, even the businesses that can forecast revenue, I do not agree with the idea of just sort of blindly following the expense side of your forecast if you're not seeing the revenue come along too. Like, just because there's a plan doesn't mean I'm unaware of the actual results of the plan. And so I always recommend like set some stage gates, because if we're not following the plan from a revenue standpoint, we got to dial back from an expense standpoint. But so I totally agree with you. If you don't have the ability to forecast, then I think you're more likely to create bad habits than good habits. And you should maybe just be working based on current line of sight a quarter at a time, right? Like ultimately, this is my team. This is what I need to generate a break-even result and a 10%, a 20% margin result. And this is sort of like again, from a staffing perspective, this is kind of my utilization ceiling. Like once my utilization exceeds this ceiling, I know I now need to go higher because I don't have enough capacity. Great. I'll hire. My expenses have gone up. My targets have gone up. My ceiling goes up. And I just manage the business that way, one foot in front of the other. I think if you don't have a repeatable revenue engine, that's the way to do it. Again, my first answer is like, maybe you shouldn't be forecasting in general, which I know is not a thing accountants necessarily say, but I think for some smaller organizations, they shouldn't be.
Awesome.
Not 12 months out, but okay. Yes. I mean, like looking at
I'll just tell. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Yeah. No. Again, maybe let me just define a forecast as like a 12-month or greater view into the future. I don't know that that's going to add value, but I'm not suggesting you shouldn't be looking into the future. It's really just maybe a forecast is trying to predict beyond what I have line of sight to.
Yes.
Trying to predict beyond what I have line of sight to is an exercise that is only, applicable to those that can do that.
Yes.
I think I'm going to use
words interchangeably a lot. Budget, forecast, scenario plan.
I know this is the framework that I really like you pushing me on that definition. I believe a forecast is trying to predict beyond what you have line of sight to. That is the UpSource definition, TM right now. Okay. Anyway, Caroline.
Yeah, that's
what else we got?
a really great segue into this next question we have. So,
Really
how do I accurately
that.
forecast and measure profitability on a client by client basis?
Track your time and have solid project managers that can anticipate any hard costs and planned time against those projects.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agreed. You have to have that data. Like, you know, I think how do I forecast the profit on a project is sort of just like a different way of asking how do I scope a
Oh,
project?
yeah.
Like this is just, you know, ultimately I have again, and I'm making an assumption here that this is like a fixed fee engagement. Obviously, like time and materials, you just kind of know what the margin's going to be. But in a fixed fee engagement, yeah, I got to estimate the amount of hours and other hard costs that are going to go into it. The only other ingredient is just to apply a cost rate against those hours. And then boom, you got a margin. And then, of course, determining how I'm doing against that is exactly what you described, which is I've got to track time and I've got to create a consistent mechanism. We have project profitability templates, reach out if you want to see them, that we use to measure both completed and in-flight projects on at least a monthly basis. And so our method is, you know, for in-flight projects, we're going to say, okay, whatever. As of today, we have, you know, it's $100,000 projects and we've sunk, you know, let's just say $10,000 of cost into it. So then we ask the question, well, how far are we on toward completion of this $100,000 project? Are we 50% complete? Okay, well, if we're 50% complete, then we've earned $50,000 and we've spent $10,000, which means our profit on this project is $40,000, which is an 80% margin. That actually might be too good, but that's a great margin. Cool. We'll check in next month. Like it's basically that exercise across all your projects in a sort of repeatable mechanism. Cool.
And I
Great.
feel like you kind of touched on this other question that we had, kind of in the same topic of how do I know which projects are profitable and worth doing and which ones aren't?
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I like to look at, again, in that project profitability template, break out by either the type of project that it is. I've got a client that categorizes them in their own unique way. And so we sort that data by like this, it's basically like the size of the project. So it just depends on the agency. If it's like web versus design, it depends on your business. And so when you're looking at your full portfolio of project profitability, then you can sort that data by the types of project it is to start to glean information. Are we more profitable if we're doing a $200,000 project versus $50,000 project? Or maybe it's a website design.
Yeah. Yeah, and I 1,000% agree with everything you just said. I think the only thing I would add is I feel like a lot of folks start with the theme in mind. I think this is more or less profitable, or this is a problem, or whatever. And I kind of believe that like you determine those themes bottom up, like brick by brick. And so the exercise happens. I do the project profitability. I identify a project that is out of my sort of target threshold. And then I ask the question, why? Okay, great. I'm going to go solve that on that particular project. I'm also write down like what that reason was. Okay, I'll go to the next one. Okay,
Yep.
what is the issue? Oh, wait a minute. Those two things are the same. Great. Two dots equal a line. Now I've created a theme and I can start to think more like holistically. But I think in general, people try to determine or conclude, oh, I have this problem, and they make the solution before they actually have, before the data bottoms up actually kind of tells them they have that.
Yeah.
So that's the way to identify those themes, brick by brick, which is project by project, to define the metaphor. Okay, Caroline, what else we got?
Okay, so we're gonna switch topics over to the life cycle of agencies that we had put out. So referring back to your life cycle of agencies, if I'm feeling stuck in build mode, what should I do to get out of it?
Well, I mean, I can answer first. Meredith, you feel free to add to this. The wonderful thing about build mode is it comes with a recipe. And that recipe is the hierarchy of financial needs. And so it's just a linear roadmap. I mean, that is like my answer to the question is work your way up the hierarchy of financial needs. Because honestly, if you have done that, it's impossible to be stuck in build mode, right? So, and usually, again, I'm making assumptions and you can tell me from experience what you think, but I think like 95 out of 100 agencies who are stuck in build mode have a unit economic problem. In other words, like their gross margin is inadequate. They're generating 20, 30% gross margins, which means they're like probably losing money, but if anything, like kind of breaking even. And so they don't have any reserves. They can't invest in anything. Everybody's playing from behind. And, they want to solve all these other things. But it's like, well, no, you don't have the right to solve any of those things until you found a way to make money on your projects. That's why we're here. And so, like, you have to have a gross margin in the 40s at a minimum, probably closer to 50, depending on who you are. And if you're not there, that's why you're stuck. And quite frankly, one of the bigger steps forward is a step backwards, which is I have too many people. And I'm just sort of expecting new business to fall from the sky, but it's not going to. And actually taking a step backwards, getting sort of gross margin positive, generating some free cash flow, actually frees you up to start to grow again. And so, I mean, that's an overly general solution, but that's like most common reason for folks who are in this situation.
Yeah.
No other thoughts,
Cool.
Mayor?
No, I mean, I agree. It's gross margin.
It's gross margin.
It's
Just what
it's
it
not the
is.
fun answer. Like the fun answer or the better answer is like, yeah, let me cut some of these like meals and entertainment. No, like no, it's
And the other possible answer is again, it's that business that I described. This is a little harder, but it's that business I described that is I don't have existing revenue. I just have new revenue.
mm,
I To be honest with you, I think it's incredibly difficult. I won't say it's impossible, but I think it's incredibly difficult to get to grow mode without existing revenue. Like if you have to every quarter, because I've said this publicly before, but if your business model is such that you could have a record quarter in Q1, more money than you've ever created, and then go out of business in Q2 because your business is such that you have to go hunt for your meal every single quarter. There is nothing consistent. There's nothing existing. You can't stack revenue. It's just, it depletes and you refill it and it depletes and you refill it. Like if that's your model, I just think that is a hamster wheel model. I guess the only way out of that is to grow the people who are generating the revenue, if that makes
yeah,
sense, right? Like if you have one partner who can go out and get $1 million every year or every half a year, whatever it is, well, then you just need to add people who can do that. But that is very, very difficult to do in the traditional agency kind of model
yeah.
because, hiring like independent sellers who can go do that that's not a good
Well, doesn't
recipe.
doesn't work
Doesn't
out.
work.
One area I have two thoughts. One
Yeah.
is one thing that I've seen that has worked over the last year and a half or so is well, before that, but I've seen enlistment of like the entire team. So your account team, your team that's working with those clients are trying to find other projects and other work to do with those existing clients in different areas. Maybe you're working with one department at an Apple or something like that, and you can go work with another one. So developing those relationships so it's not just all falling on, one owner. And then this topic also is in line with what I recorded a podcast the other day with Craig, one of the other partners, and we're talking about revenue versus reoccurring revenue and non-reoccurring revenue. And his um, opinion or his suggestion was to sit down and come up with like really analyze your revenue streams and how you can think about bringing on that additional reoccurring where there's opportunity to bring on reoccurring revenue, which would also help with this topic as well.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that is the purest form of existing revenue. It is certainly the most ideal.
Yeah.
It's not the only way you can get existing revenue, but it is probably the first place to start. Because if you can do that, obviously that's certainly best case scenario. Caroline, by the way, side note, we'll drop that link to the video in the show notes. So anybody watching You can go
Just
check that out.
plug for myself.
Yeah, makes sense.
While I grab that link, it kind of sounds like you guys are on the track of kind of answering this question already, but it's saying, okay, so you're talking about someone bringing in $1 million. What's the most important thing to focus on when you're trying to get your agency to that first million? So you're stuck in the create mode phase. How am I building myself up to run into these build mode problems?
Just got to find people to buy your thing. I mean, it's just there's just no silver bullet to the $1 million, like 0 to 1. I mean, it is exclusively, do I have a right to exist in the world, and can I get people to pay me and not my competitors for this thing? And obviously the second order challenge is, okay, I've sold it. Now how do I service it? Right? Like I sold this, I went out and I sold this hyper premium offering to my second customer ever. And I don't have a team behind me because I can't afford a team. And so I'm gonna have to cobble together some, freelancers or whatever in order to deliver that. And is the promise going to match the execution? And you're going to have to do some wizardry there, but it's hard. It's really hard. This is why businesses are so valuable to own at the build mode and beyond, because they're hard to do. So yeah, there's no silver bullet, but I can tell you that, like, if it's not, how do I get customers? And then when I have them, how do I deliver the best work such that I can get more customers? If you're not thinking about those two things, you're thinking about the wrong things.
Awesome. And then our last one that we had gathered from our LinkedIn is, how do I know what my minimum viable rate should be?
Like, you're talking about like billable rate.
Right? Yeah. Well, first we should start with cost rate. What does it cost for an hour of this service? So I start with salaries of the team, fully load the salaries. I will also, if we have a ton of time off, and I'll fully load the cost rate and look at the cost rate. And then I also will back into bill rate by looking at what is the margin that I'm trying to realize. And the cost rate, bill rate is just a function of cost rate and the margin that we're targeting.
Totally agreed. Nothing to add there. I think, the other consideration is just like unpacking, what does minimum viable mean to you? Does minimum viable mean I'm going to generate 20% margin, like, or else? Or does it mean like I just need to break even, or I'm independently wealthy, and so as long as I don't, lose $1 million this year, whatever, what's your definition of minimum viable? But then, yeah, as Meredith said, like, once we use that to determine like what's our margin target, then the cost rate or the bill rate is a function of cost rate. So for instance, like somewhere in the 60s, either between like 62 to 67. It's kind of like a broad range of profit margins that we often target. 67 is the easiest one to use because it's 2/3. In other words, in order to achieve a 67% project margin, my bill rate needs to be 3 times my cost rate. And so if that, now again, at a 67% project margin, you're assuming you can utilize your team, you're probably generating a decent net margin. So that may not be the minimum viable. That's probably more like the ideal. But you just kind of scale down from there to determine like what's your minimum, what's your minimum, and then do the math.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Cool. Cool. I mean, certainly anything less than 2 is probably below the minimum. Is,
Yeah. If you
like
just
your
want to
project
take
margin.
cost rate
Yeah.
times 3, you're going to get in the, like, that's what we did for.
Cost rate times 3 is great. Cost rate times 2 is low. And
Yeah.
so there's your range.
Well, back in the day, we used to just take salary divided by 2080 and multiply it by 3, and that would get you like somewhere in that range.
Yeah,
So
that'd probably get you to like
two,
2.7 or
yeah,
2.6 or something like that, on a fully loaded basis. So
yeah,
yeah, that's not it's not too bad. Okay. I think is that we're pretty much at time. I know we've only got a half hour for the hot seat, and those are some really good questions, by the way. So thanks to the live audience, thanks to the LinkedIn audience. Caroline, anything we want to tell them other than like where to find us next month? Anything we want to tell folks before they adjourn?
Yeah, definitely don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're dropping the best insights to help grow your agency on a monthly, weekly basis. So can't wait to see you next time.
Check us there. All right. See you 1 month from now at the Agency Hot Seat. Bring your questions. Goodbye for now.